Yo, 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 yo. Grace and peace out there, family. This is the reassembling. We are back.
Yes. Back and
I
back.
am Jesse Walsh, right with me, steady as ever. Mom, favorite voice of clarity in the middle of the chaos. Are we locked in tonight or are we locked in tonight?
We are. This is a freaky deaky show.
It's going to be interesting, funny. This is a space where confusion gets dismantled and truth gets rebuilt brick by brick. If you're coming in the live chat, please let us know if our levels are equal. Um, we're here to think deeply, love boldly, and keep Christ at the absolute center of everything. At the reassembling, we don't cancel hard questions. We confront them. We don't run from tension. We refine through it. If it challenges us, good. It's our motto. If it stretches us, even better, because real faith isn't afraid of scrutiny when it's rooted in Jesus. This is where grace meets backbone, where compassion meets conviction, where truth isn't whispered, it's lived. So if something we say tonight moves you, strengthens you, or brings you closer to Christ, don't stay in the shadows. Subscribe, share, invite someone who needs it. Grow with us. You can find us everywhere: TikTok, X, Clapper, Kick, Rumble. I'm on Instagram at Jesse.Walsh at 4090. We're both on Facebook under Jesse Walsh and Raven Marie Lynn. And Mom is on X at Crystal is Ives. Let's reassemble what the world tried to shatter and scatter. So checking on my levels here. So we've been MIA for a while. I apologize.
It's all his fault.
A lot going on.
It's the son. It's the son he gave me. No.
Yeah, it's funny. It's funny. Doesn't look like we are playing on. Something happened on. Wait. I'm trying to see Kick. Are we on Kick? There we go. We're on Kick.
Cool.
Kick is kicking us off. Weird. Anyways. So we'll jump in tonight. So tonight we're talking about Beatrice Sparks, which means tonight we are also talking about one of America's favorite hobbies, losing its ever-loving mind in the name of moral concern. Because that is really the world Sparks lived in and helped feed. She came along at a time when America was already deeply suspicious of teenagers, popular culture, and basically anything that looked even slightly weird. If a kid wore black, listened to moody music, and looked unhappy, grown adults did not say, maybe adolescence is difficult. No, they said, clearly Satan has launched a pilot program in the suburbs. Real galaxy brain thinking, you know?
Yeah, and this is our second show in the series of Satanic Panic, so we're still dealing with that.
Yes. And sitting right there in the atmosphere was Beatrice Sparks, helping give fear and dramatic little voice a paperback cover. Now, Sparks matters because she became associated with the kind of sensational, emotionally loaded material that made adults feel like they were bravely confronting hidden darkness when really they were often just reading Scandal with a church face on. That is one of the oldest human traditions. Take voyeurism, baptize it in concern, and suddenly people act like they are doing research. That was the magic trick. Yeah. America has always loved a story that says, be afraid, but also feel important for being afraid. We adore that. We cannot resist it. Give people a tale full of danger, corruption, secret darkness, and a moral warning, and they will eat it like a casserole at a Baptist potluck. Right. Spark knew how to work it in that kind of environment. She knew how to package fear so that it felt personal, urgent, meaningful. And that timing was perfect, because this was the kind of era where people were already one suspicious youth pastor and two bad talk shows away from believing that a game of Dungeons and Dragons could summon Beelzebub into the rec room. This was the age of adults looking at awkward teenagers and reacting like they had uncovered an underground satanic command structure, which is hilarious because the average teenager can barely load a dishwasher correctly. But sure, let's pretend like Trevor is part of a disciplined occult network because he drew a skull on his notebook and listened to music his parents didn't like. The man cannot pass algebra, but apparently he is a high priest of darkness now. Incredible, it's incredible.
Right.
But right.
It's like, this can't be real. Is this real?
My goodness. That's why Beatrice Sparks is such an interesting figure. She was not just writing in a vacuum. She was feeding a cultural appetite, a culture already nervous, already reactive, already eager to believe dramatic explanations for complicated problems. Teenagers are struggling, Satan. Music is changing, Satan. Yeah. Kids are emotional and rebellious, double Satan. Satan, because obviously the most reasonable explanation for youth confusion in a changing culture is not social pressure, family instability, hormones, identity struggles, or the basic human condition. No, it's the occult infiltration. Outstanding work, everybody. Really elite use of the frontal lobe, if I might add.
Right.
And to be fair, that is what moral panic always does. It takes real fear and then puts them on steroids until everyone starts hallucinating patterns. It lowers the IQ of the room. It turns suspicion into certainty and drama into truth. That is what
Mm-hmm.
makes the topic more than just funny. It is funny, absolutely. It's also revealing, because once a culture wants to be scared, it'll go shopping for storytellers who know how to feed that fear.
Right.
And Sparks, whatever else you say about her, knew how to do that. So tonight we're not just talking about the author. We are talking about a symbol of a very weird American habit, mistaking emotional intensity for truth and calling it discernment. We are
Mm.
talking about a moment when the country was so ready to panic that all someone had to do was hand them a dramatic narrative, and they would nod like they had just discovered the Dead Sea Scrolls of suburban corruption.
Right.
That is where we begin, not with every detail, because Mom has been doing the deep work on that, and I'm not about to run in here like a historical raccoon and knock over all the good material. My job is just to set the stage, and you drive the boat. I'm just gonna stir the I'm steering the ship. I'm steering the ship, if you will. So if you want to understand Beatrice Sparks, you have to understand the kind of world that made her matter, a world full of fierce, moral theater, and adults who were way too confident that every weird teenager was 2 journal entries away from a satanic drum circle.
Right.
So where do
Yeah.
we start?
Well,
Have the book.
you have a picture of the book that we're kind of, yeah.
I don't know if a lot of people may not have heard about this, but people have, maybe. I
Yeah.
don't know.
This was in the 70s, and our last show was from the 80s with Michelle Remembers. Remember, she suddenly remembered she was in a satanic cult that her parents put her in. I'm like, okay, whatever. So we're going to the 70s now, and this is the book that Beatrice Sparks wrote, but she chose to put it as anonymous. I forgot what the whole reason was. I think her publisher told her it would be better to do it this way, whatever.
Yeah.
But she claims this book was based off of a real diary from a real 15-year-old girl who ended up ODing on drugs.
That's what she says. Shout out to the one and only Reginald Wells for checking us out. God bless you, brother.
Hello. Yes. So anyways, and then I know this always comes backwards, but this is the book Unmask Alice, which a author began to have questions about. Go Ask Alice. So he did some extensive research. It's a really good book. And we're going to be showing some of his stuff too. But yeah, he started asking questions like, this isn't measuring up somewhere. So we'll get into that too.
Yeah. Very interesting how she was part of the Mormon church, not just kind of the fringe split sect of Mormonism. She was very, very heavy into the church. We'll touch on that a little later.
Yeah, very devout.
Very interesting. And that matters, you know what I mean?
Yeah. So we were going to show a few videos because, who wants to look at us all night and talk?
I know I do.
Yes. But anyway, so the first one is that Womanica?
Yeah.
I don't know how to say it, but
yeah.
So this one lady is discussing it here, which I found interesting.
Timestamp. Okay. Are we ready?
Yeah.
Media Network, I'm Jenny Kaplan, and this is Womanica. This month we're talking about women who found themselves at the center of controversy, whether deserved or not. You may have seen her book on a library shelf or passed around school hallways. In hushed whispers, teens shared stories from the real diary of an anonymous girl's descent into addiction. But this diary is a complete fabrication, and the first of many in a long line of fictional diaries by troubled teens, written by the serial con artist, Beatrice Sparks. Beatrice Sparks was born on January 15, 1917, in a mining town in Idaho. Her parents moved the family to Utah before divorcing, leaving Beatrice's mother alone to support the children. Beatrice dropped out of high school to join her mother in the workforce, but eventually left Utah for sunny California. While working in California, Beatrice met Lavorne Sparks, a Mormon entrepreneur from Texas. The two married, and thanks to some prosperous oil investments, became very wealthy. Though Beatrice was now the housewife to a rich man, she wanted a career of her own. She started publishing her poetry and writing in advice columns, but received little recognition for her work. After Beatrice's son started college at Brigham Young University, the Sparks family relocated to Provo, Utah. Beatrice and her husband became active members of their Mormon church and community. She even contributed to the church's newsletters and other publications. Then came Beatrice's first foray into a scheme.
With the music.
Albeit indirectly.
I didn't realize it was up here. I'm sorry. Okay, sorry.
Beatrice was hired to write educational scripts to be recorded onto vinyl by low-level celebrities. Those records were then sold as sets in a multi-level marketing scheme.
Yeah.
The job didn't last long, but it got Beatrice in close contact with television host Art Linkletter.
Mm-hmm.
Linkletter was a big name in family TV with a lot of pull.
Yeah, he was.
Beatrice tried to use their working relationship to her advantage. But it wasn't until Linkletter suffered a family tragedy that he called on her.
Mm-hmm.
Linkletter's daughter died by suicide, and he became convinced that LSD played a role in her death. He became a steadfast voice in President Nixon's campaign against drugs. The public attention on psychedelics, paired with Linkletter's grieving, inspired Beatrice to pitch a manuscript she was working on. According to Beatrice, she'd been volunteering at a local hospital and had befriended a young girl struggling with addiction. After the girl died suddenly, she said, Beatrice somehow got a hold of the girl's diary and edited it down.
Yeah.
Linkletter helped Beatrice get it published. Buried Alive, the diary of an anonymous teenager, told the story of a troubled teen who dove into the underworld of drug addiction after drinking a soda spiked with LSD. Beatrice hoped to see her name on the book's cover, but the publishing house had questions. How did Beatrice get a hold of the diary? Who was the unnamed narrator? And what were Beatrice's qualifications? The book's editor felt putting Beatrice's name on the book was risky. Instead, they published the book anonymously and renamed it Go Ask Alice.
Mm-hmm.
The book became a bestseller, spawning a TV movie starring William Shatner in 1973. While teens loved the book, parents were not fans. The depictions of sex, drugs, and addiction in Go Ask Alice made it one of the most widely banned books of the decade, which only made it more sought after. Beatrice was sitting on a gold mine, but most people didn't know she was behind one of the market's most popular books. Beatrice started doing press, claiming she edited Go Ask Alice. When a grieving Utah mother read that Beatrice Sparks was behind the acclaimed diary, she called Beatrice and hoped she would do the same for her son's journal. Her son, Alden Barrett, had struggled with depression and found himself at odds with his conservative Mormon community. He, like the protagonist in Beatrice's book, had also abused drugs and run away from home. When his girlfriend's parents discovered his past, they forced her to break up with him. Alden, distraught, ended his life soon after. Beatrice took the boy's journal and published her own version of it in 1978. But Jay's journal, as Beatrice's book was titled, was nothing like Alden's real life.
Yeah.
Jay's story was about a boy deeply involved in devil worship and animal sacrifice. Beatrice had taken just a few details from Alden's diary and fabricated a world of satanic panic around it.
Yeah.
Alden's family was never told when the diary would be published. Instead, they found the book on shelves. To make matters worse, people picked up on the details Beatrice had kept in the book, discovered Alden's identity, and harassed his family.
Yeah.
Jay's journal was just one piece of literature that contributed to conspiracy theories of cults and satanic worship in America. Beatrice's writing was part of a larger moral panic that sought to blame youth depression, drug use, and sexual activity to boogeymen, like satanic cults.
Mm-hmm. Wow. Is that it on that one? Okay. Yeah, so there she is in all her glory. She really just wanted to make a name for herself. She didn't care about these teenagers. You know?
Yeah. Yeah, it's kind of sad. I mean, just getting your
That's
name up.
very
I mean,
sad.
it happens. It happens. And today, I mean, it's still going on. It probably will always be something that goes on, exploiting
Yeah.
people for gain. So the story obviously isn't true, but this kid was kind of inspiration for her. Like, hey, you know what? That's a decent story. Let me twist some things and make it, you know,
Yeah.
what's going on.
Yeah, because this is when the whole rock music is evil and all this kind of stuff's going on. So, and then the drugs, of course, we had the drugs coming in the 60s and 70s.
The
We
war on drugs.
understand that
Yeah.
that was an issue, of course. So she just fed into that, and pretty much made parents feel like, oh, you know what? I think it's Satan. Your kid, not listening to you and this, that, and the other thing. They're worshiping Satan. Oh, okay. You
Hmm.
know what I'm saying? That's just
Be
I'm
an easy
just like,
scapegoat, because it's to really think these things through. That's I mean, because we've mentioned about the church and the like for example, people that lived in medieval Europe. We talk about context of the Old Testament.
mm-hmm,
They had much less to fill up their day. I mean, a lot of people in medieval Europe, they're trying to gather food, survive the winter. Here
right,
we are trying to pay our bills, trying to balance finances and get our vacations in, and so there's a lot more nuance and details about our daily life. So I think when we come around to this, people just want that ultimate villain. Say, oh, it's the devil, it's demons. That's why
yeah,
the deliverance ministries are so popular. Obviously, it's a demon. I don't have to work these things out and go see a therapist and maybe work out and get healthy. And it's a devil. It's a demon. You know what I mean?
right. And if you just blame Satan on your teenagers' behavior or the music they listen to, if you just call it Satan, then
Mhm.
you don't have to take the time to find out what they're actually listening to. Remember when you were into Corn and all these different bands, and I didn't know much about them,
Mhm.
and I listened to some of it, and I thought they were a good band,
Mhm.
But we have to remember that people that don't know the Lord, that doesn't mean that anything they like, if a band doesn't know the Lord, okay, let's
Mhm.
use Corn.
Mhm.
Does this mean there's nothing good about that? They don't
Right.
play their instruments good, it's just
They don't write a
it's
good
black and
song.
white.
Right. Right.
It's just black and white, and if you listen to them, you're full of Satan. So
Mhm.
then how do we treat a person that we assume is living for Satan? Well, instead of actually having some compassion and trying
Yeah.
to reach the lost, we're just condemning them.
We
Oh,
are
you're
then.
listening to Satan's music. Okay.
Then
You know.
we're no better than the Stephen Andersons and Westboro Baptist churches and all the people that condemn.
Right.
You're going to hell.
Yeah.
The Christians, the bad name in the 20th century, 19th and 20th century.
Yeah.
The Salem witch
So,
trials. Holy cow! This is all.
right.
Satanic Panic is basically Salem witch trials revived,
Thank you.
more
Yeah.
frenzy and more nuanced of all the villains. It's just these witches over here. We get rid of these witches.
Yeah.
For good. Stay in our humble
Yeah.
village. But
And
now
they're
the
infiltrating Greg Locke's church too. So,
I'm glad he's there. He is the warlock, the wizard who can see right through it. He's from the state. He has what impresses me about him is he has that eagle eye all the way in the back. He can spot. Is that a witch?
oh, he said they go to his Bible study too. They astral project to his Bible study. Really, dude? Okay.
And believe it or not, he didn't go to
Anyway.
seminary. Believe it or not,
Well, that people shouldn't go to seminary. It's called cemetery. So,
cemetery. Yeah, I should have
yeah.
learned ways of the dead man.
So
Okay.
anyway, we got the next video, which is the Candlewick Library.
Yep, Candlewick Library.
Yeah, library.
And if you guys are tuning in, tell us where you're watching from. I was always exciting to hear where people are watching from. If you're overseas,
Yeah, that's pretty cool. Mm-hmm.
in my next door apartment, cool.
Right.
So let's turn this bad boy on. I'm gonna try to change the angles on this. Let's see if we want this one, or we can let's try it.
There we go.
How it goes? We're going to. I got the timestamp for this one.
Okay.
Beatrice Sparks and the books that she put out, most notably Go Ask Alice and Jay's Journal.
Mm-hmm. Go Ask Alice.
In my March
Wait.
wrap-up, I talked about the book that I read, Unmask Alice.
Oh,
Sorry.
that's my book. I just showed.
I have that. I'm sorry. I don't think I
840.
have.
Oh, it's okay.
Yeah, 840 is where we start off on this one, right? 840. Okay. Easy.
Start there.
These
Yeah.
journals.
Okay.
Why are they put out there as completely nonfiction, and are they completely nonfiction? Beatrice Sparks was born in Idaho on January 15th, 1917, but her family soon moved and she grew up in Logan, Utah. The stories about her childhood you have to take with a grain of salt, because so much of her life that she has told people is made up that it's hard to know exactly what is true. It seems as if her dad left her family for someone else, for a different woman, and so her mom was left with her and her siblings. And at 17 years old, she left home and went to California. She got married in 1937 to Leroy Sparks. He actually had his own wealth. As far as I could tell, he had invested in some kind of oil or something like that, and he was quite wealthy. So when people look at her and the mansion she had and the kinds of clothes she wore and stuff, everybody kind of assumes that it's just based on these books. But really, they were wealthy already. But while they were in California, she had 3 children. One did die in infancy. And she started to write for different magazines, for church publications, and different businesses that needed a writer. She wrote by the name B. Sparks, or sometimes Susan Lavorne, which would have her husband's name as the last name. And she briefly did work with Joseph Barbera of, if you watched any cartoons in the 80s and you see Hanna-Barbera, the Barbera part of that group, he had a magazine that she wrote for occasionally. And in fact, she even helped write the play, The Maid and the Martian. She co-wrote in some form with him. And that later became a movie called Pajama Party, but they had changed a lot of the dialogue and a lot of the content, so she wasn't credited. I don't know if anything that she wrote was in it or not, but she wasn't credited for it. So after her kids grew up, she and her husband moved to Provo, Utah, and into a large mansion in 1964. She had volunteered in a veterans hospital in Los Angeles, and so once they were here, she was volunteering at the Utah State Hospital in Provo, which was a mental institution. And then she says that she volunteered as a youth counselor at the hospital as well, and then she did volunteer at youth camps at BYU, at Brigham Young University, which is a Mormon college. When she tells the story, it was as a youth counselor at both places, and based on a story that is in this book, she definitely was putting herself forward to some of the kids there as a youth counselor, somebody that worked in counseling. But if you actually look at what she did in those places, her duties were both administrative and organizational. They were not in professional counseling. In the Provo Daily Herald, it was filled with stories of she and her husband and their fundraising and their speaking. She worked for a multi-level marketing company called the Family Achievement Industries. They put together these 5 album sets of vinyl records that were filled with uplifting stories and spiritual wisdom and parenting advice, and people would have to buy them and then try to sell them. And so pretty soon they realized, okay, a lot of people have bought them and we have to hurry and put these together. So they hired Stephen Covey, who you may have heard of. He's written books like The Highly Effective People. He's also a Mormon from here. They hired him as an author for it, and also Beatrice. I don't know if there were any other authors or if it was just the 2 of them, but they were writing the scripts for these records. And then they hired Art Linkletter from the Kids Say the Darndest Things to be the face of the company and the narrator. So she got to know him through this. Well, if you know anything about Art Linkletter's story, one of his daughters, when she grew up, she ended up committing suicide. She jumped out of a building, and it was said that she was on LSD when she did that. So he went on a crusade against drugs. Well, then later on, it did come out that she was tested for drugs, and it showed that she wasn't on drugs. However, in this book, he does show and point out that the police didn't test for acid at that time. So it is still possible that she was under the influence of LSD when she jumped. Art Linkletter was on this crusade against drugs because of what happened to his daughter. And so when somebody who he had worked with at this company came to him with a diary that she said was given to her by someone that she had counseled with, and it was a story of a young girl who got into drugs, and then that led her to prostitution and eventually led to her death, and that she had been entrusted with this diary and she had edited it into this book. He was all on board to help her get that published. So this book was Go Ask Alice. Many of you may have heard of it or read it. I had to read it in junior high. I read this before Jay's Journal. It came out in 1971. It was written as Go Ask Alice by Anonymous. Beatrice Sparks' name was not on the cover. or anywhere showing that she had anything to do with it, which really bothered her. It was the book agent and the book publisher, they insisted that it not have her name on it, that kids would be more open to reading this and listening to it if it didn't have an adult associated with it. So she had kind of go along with that in order to get it published. So this girl, she spirals through drugs. It shows her trying to get better and then falling back and getting into prostitution and all these different things that happened to her. And then she dies from an overdose a few days after the last entry of the book. It has her last diary entry, and then there's an afterword that tells how she died. This book was wildly successful. And it eventually was even made into a TV movie starring Andy Griffith and William Shatner. People all over were reading this book. I've also seen that there are actresses and famous people now that credit that book for keeping them from doing drugs or for helping them get off of drugs. So the book has done some good. However, it brings up the question of, is it ethical to put a book out as fact when it isn't? So,
Okay.
Yeah. Right?
So interesting. It seems like earlier on she's trying to find a niche. She just wants
Yeah.
to like be creative here, be creative there, because she has the networking. She has shaking hands
Right.
with powerful people, important people, where she can, she wants to be in the media. It's what I'm getting. She wanted to be in the media, be
Yeah.
famous.
She wanted a name for herself,
So it never really was about honesty and telling someone's story.
Right.
But yeah, I didn't know that. Did you know about this book in the 70s?
No, 71. She said it came out. I was
Yeah,
7.
71.
Why would I know that?
I guess you weren't looking for Satanic Panic propaganda.
When I was 7, no, I was dropping acid.
Dropping acid. So now I have another timestamp here for when she goes into Jay's journal. So
yeah, and Jay, his real name was Eldon Barrett,
okay.
And this was a real kid, right? And in the book Unmask Alice, it's very sad reading about Alden's life and his frustrations inside of himself and his depression, and he felt like he just didn't click with the Mormon religion, and so he was going through a lot, and he did sadly end his life with his dad's gun, which is very sad. His younger siblings were home and found him. So it's very sad. And then Beatrice takes his journal and just adds all this ridiculous stuff. Yeah, and we'll get into that.
So the actual kid was part of the LDS church? Say LSD church.
I think that should be called the LSD church, right? What's the difference, right?
Yeah, it's I've seen a lot of interviews with ex-Mormons, and I did watch a documentary like 3 days ago on the fracturing of the Warren Jeffs sect out in Utah, on the border in Colorado City, between Arizona and Utah. They're still around, but they're a very small group. They're very fractured, very isolated.
That guy's a freak.
He still kind of has semi-control and authority from prison. You know how that's.
And he had wives that were like 12 and 13.
Serving a life sentence. They're thinking he's going to get out. But that's anytime they get in trouble or
it's persecution.
It's martyrdom. So therefore, you are a prophet. Of course, you've been arrested. I wonder if we did a study, how many cult leaders are barking orders from prison. I can name 5 off the top of my head.
Right.
But anyway, she's going to go into Jay's.
And their little flock is so brainwashed.
Oh man,
it's hard to reach them. So it's sad to me. But.
Okay, so I guess she's going to touch on the actual story right here.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. It still should have been marketed as fiction, but it's so interesting to think about. I would love to hear your thoughts on that as we go along. Going back to Jay's journal, the one that was so impactful to me. In 1973, Marcella Bellett, a mom in Pleasant Grove, Utah, she saw an article in, I believe it was the Daily Herald, about how Beatrice Sparks was the person that had edited and put out Go Ask Alice. So she's finally getting that recognition she wants about this book. But it also looks as if she was the counselor and she's putting out the diary that she's edited. And Marcella sees that this woman is also a Mormon, just like she is. She had 3 kids, just like Marcella, and that she lives only 9 miles away. Her son, Alden, has just committed suicide, and she has a diary that they found. In it, you can see his depression he was dealing with. and she thinks that maybe if I can get this diary into the hands of Beatrice Sparks, it can help parents and kids to understand depression and suicide and save some lives. So she reaches out to her. So I'm going to talk a little bit about Alden Barrett himself. He dealt with depression and mood swings for most of his life. It sounds like from the earliest years. And as he got older, it seems like he really didn't want very much to do with the Mormon religion. And he's stuck in Pleasant Grove, Utah, in Happy Valley, Utah County, surrounded by other Mormons. This is during the Vietnam War era, and he does not agree with his family politically or socially or religiously. He's a kid that's very confused and very upset about the world around him. He grew his hair out long, which wasn't very long. It was just shoulders, but it was long by their standards, and they want him.
That's when things went downhill, when he started to grow his hair out.
Yeah, he's trying to be a woman, like Stephen Anderson would say.
Yes, yeah.
To cut it all the time. He doesn't want to. At one point, 2 of his older step siblings hold him down and cut his hair. So the mom ends up having to take him to a barber and fixing it. He just kind of started spiraling, dealing with depression himself anyway. And then there's all of this turmoil going on in his life. He feels like he doesn't fit in. He's not accepted. You know, all of those typical feelings that a lot of kids feel. And it's just compounded because it's during that time. Based on what I read about him in this book, he did getting into drugs. And his dad was a doctor. He was stealing pills from his father's office. And so he was doing something that was wrong. However, before his parents found it out, they knew he was doing other things, and they wanted to really get control of the situation. And one day, they took away everything out of his bedroom, only left behind the light and the carpet. And then they made him strip down to his underwear, gave him a blanket and a pillow, put him in his room, put a lock and a chain around the outside doorknob, and connected it to the sink of a nearby bathroom, so he could not get out of his room. He had to ask permission to go to the bathroom, to get water. And they said that he needed structured goals and to understand why he was in there. In the book, when it's talking about this, it says that
we do. People tend to look at this and say, see, this is how cults are. But we see this same exact behavior within Protestant sects. So it's just, it's not exclusive to people with fringe ideas.
Yeah.
People who believe in a historical Christian faith that still do these kind of things. So
absolutely.
Let's be transparent and honest here.
Right. Amen.
He wrote down, I started saying things without thinking. I said school and family rules and are set up like a dictatorship. This is not so, because opinions and suggestions can be freely expressed if done so in the proper manner. Then he said, what is actually wrong is trying to justify the actions of people I love. I still have to work at staying straight. It doesn't come naturally yet. But then they wanted a list of his personal traits that needed fixing. So he sent back another message under the door. They were doing this with a pencil and paper under the door. He said, I'm not happy with myself because 1, I am conceited. 2, disrespectful. 3, a liar. 4, I give in to temptation of temporary pleasure. 5, I'm too individualistic. 6, I procrastinate. 7, I'm lazy. And it went on, wasteful, unorganized, self-centered, rebellious. He slid the paper out. A mostly blank paper came back. At the top, it said, this is an outline only. So they wanted more from him. He tried again. Why am I conceited? Because I tend to be selfish and let my life revolve around myself. 2, disrespectful, because I ignore the love and trust given to me by the people I should respect. So he filled several pages, and this went back and forth, and then finally they decided to let him out. It says this author talked to one of his friends later, and he said, that's abuse. And that family, he said with a harsh, bitter laugh, I think Alden was the only sane one. That was how I felt when I was reading it. I was like, this sounds very much like the Frankie family that I talked about recently. The abuse that happened in that situation. Now, it sounds like the siblings holding him down to cut his hair and this room situation, they seem very isolated, like it was just those couple of times, but it also shows that there was abusive actions happening. Now, the fact that he was on drugs, maybe these things were needed more than they would be for something else. But I think his parents probably were feeling a lot of helplessness with the fact that they were, assuming he was doing drugs, and he was. Like I said, they found out later he was stealing pills from his dad's office. So there was a lot going on in this kid's family. He ended up going to a counselor. They felt like he was dealing with depression. This counselor, unfortunately, told them that he wasn't depressed enough to need help of medication or anything like that, something that might have actually helped him. But they did.
That's sad.
Grace and peace, the one and only In Context with Jim Green.
That's just sad to me.
Yeah, it is. I mean, what more can you say? We've seen abuse.
Yeah.
All shapes and forms, sizes. It's just what are we called to be? Salt of the earth, and
Mm-hmm.
Man, it's just sad when they're lost and they're, especially as a teenager, that's the hardest years of someone's life.
Yeah,
That
and there
system.
should be trust between a child and their parents. You
Mhm.
know, being a parent's hard. I'm not a perfect mom. You can attest to that, but I try to be a good mom. But kids look to their parents to know some things, right?
Yeah,
And he had a lot of questions about Mormonism because he didn't, have that same belief system as his parents did. But he
sure.
didn't have that open door to say, Mom, Dad, can we talk about this? No, you're being rebellious. You know, you got to honor the prophet Joseph Smith and all this nonsense, because I think, and I understand once you're a teenager, you might come less and less to your parents for advice, right? You might be reaching out to your peers and stuff, but parents should know how to answer these kinds of questions and not take it as an attack on your religion or whatever, You want to give Jim a little brief update of what we've been talking about?
Yeah, so we're going into a woman named Beatrice Sparks, born in the what,
1917 or some crap.
1917. She was part of the LDS Church. She did a lot of, I would say, articles and literature for the Latter-day Saint Church, the mainstream church, the Brigham Young
Hmm.
University.
Yeah.
There is a young man who, within the church, committed suicide. Correct.
Yeah.
He basically took his story and added all these extra events that didn't happen. What did she say? She turns it into a spiritual battle that's really going on. Like
Yeah,
she has
she starts
insight.
saying he was worshiping Satan and he's involved in all these rituals, and none of that was true.
Yeah, so it's kind of the bigger. It's going to a bigger piece of the puzzle of the Satanic Panic, what we've kind of been touching on.
Yeah.
So it's really
So
interesting
now
stuff.
we're in the 70s. Last time we did the first show was the 80s, and we're eventually going to get to the 90s when we deal with the West Memphis 3.
West
So
Memphis 3. Yeah, that's a good observation.
yeah,
Yeah, very sad. Especially
very
when
sad.
not just the faith we hold, answering the questions, because there's a lot of things. Me growing up in the Pentecostal church, you being a young believer, we're never equipped with these this apologetic for answers of the faith, the reason why you have the hope that lies within
Right.
you, stuff like that. In hindsight, when we look at it and say, wow, having answers to these hard questions, not just theological and biblical, but like questions to life.
Yeah.
Those are big when you start grasping, like, holy cow. I mean, there's a real faith. There's a real spirit in the world. Especially today when we talk about deliverance ministries and prosperity gospels and stuff. Like, this is not the gospel. This is not the faith once delivered to the saints.
Right.
Why? Now we have an explanation. But when you're in these systems and these movements and these fringe groups, you don't question nothing. Like,
right. And I feel like I was brainwashed going to that church for 13 years.
Mm-hmm.
I really did. So
shout out to the one and only Remy Canadian. How you doing, brother? Good to see you. Okay, shall we continue?
Yeah.
Did end up sending him to an outdoor wilderness program. And again, if you've watched my Frankie's video, you know that their son Chad also went to a wilderness program called Anasazi. And my husband went to that as well. So in this, it says they sent him to an outdoor survival program run by a BYU instructor. It doesn't say what the program was, but I did look it up afterward because I was very curious to know whether it was the same one that my husband and Chad Frankie went to or not. And that was one of the very first ones, Anasazi. And it did start in 1969, so it was before this. And it was started by a BYU professor. So it is very likely that that is what he went to, but it was just done differently then. It wasn't as long and everything. So this outdoor program worked for him. It did good things for him. It helped him to get off drugs. It helped him in the short term. But he had relapses afterward. And so eventually he ended up going to a place called Wasatch Academy. And this was an ultra strict school in Sanpete County, which was 70 miles away from Pleasant Grove. Grove. Wasatch Academy sounds like it was an extremely strict place. You had a certain time you had to wake up and go to breakfast, and then you had chores, you had chapel, you had schoolwork, and then dinner and study hall. Lights out came at 10 p.m., no exceptions. And they also had a uniform. When I was first reading that, I thought, oh, this isn't going to end well, but actually it did. Their rigid approach was misleading, that it emphasized individual education, and it kept class sizes small, averaging one teacher for every 10 students. Most of the teachers had PhDs, and nearly all had a lot of training. More than 90% of Wasatch graduates went on to a 4-year college, and a significant number enrolled in the Ivy League. So this was actually a really good place for him, and he had a good experience. It says thinking was welcomed, and that it was even rewarded. So it's very different from the experiences he had up to this point. He was introduced through other people to kind of Eastern religions and stuff. But Beatrice would use that as the occult. So in Jay's journal, she will, spoiler, change his journal entries and make it the occult and witchcraft that he is exposed to. There was some new age things, but nothing to the point of occult, at least as far as I could see in my reading. She, I think, latched onto that thinking that can become something bigger. He came home after this. He seems to really have enjoyed it and wanted to be back in that environment. He was not happy once he got back, and he ended up running away. So obviously there is a lot of back and forth going on in this kid in his life, and he runs away to San Francisco, finally ending up at a shelter there, and they will let you come in and give you a place to stay and food to eat, but the rule is they have to be able to call your parents. So they did. So he called his parents, and they came to get him. They drove overnight to get him. They brought him home, and he was determined at this point that he was going to change. And this is when he started his diary. He does have a breakup with a girl he felt like he was really in love with, but eventually he ends up meeting another girl that he falls head over heels in love with. She feels the same way about him, and they begin dating. He's still dealing with his depression, and eventually her family finds out about his past, which most of the people in that area seem to have known about, but they didn't. And so then they, you know, understandably, they want their daughter to date other people. A lot of that, I think, comes from the fact that she had dated somebody previously, and when she was broken up with, she took a ton of pills. This is obviously two kids who have had a history of instability, and they've gotten together and they've become each other's world. But when she starts having to date other people and her ex-boyfriend comes back into town, Alden kind of spirals into depression more. And so through his real journal entries, you can see that. You can see the depression he's dealing with. But as far as I can tell from this book, he did change, and he did get better in so many ways, but he still had this depression that he couldn't get to go away. So the parents are gone at a BYU game, and he is babysitting his younger siblings, and he shoots himself. There are so many hard things about this, because then his younger sibling finds him. It talked about how the older siblings had to clean up the scene because there weren't people in the police force at that time that were doing it here. And so there's just so much sadness for this family dealing with what has happened with their son. There was definitely a stigma on suicide. His dad's medical partner, Dale Murdoch, filled out Alden's death certificate, and he had seen the gunshot wound. He knew what had happened, but he still circled undetermined instead of suicide. But the Barretts decided to ignore that and let people know what really happened so that maybe it could help other people. It said in the Daily Herald, Pleasant Grove, Alden Neil Barrett, 16, was found dead of what police said was an apparently self-inflicted gunshot wound Saturday evening. He was a member of the LDS Church living in the Pleasant Grove 8th Ward, and it has their address there. That goes back to Marcella Barrett finding out about Beatrice Sparks and what she has done with Go Ask Alice, and thinking maybe my son's story can help someone else. Maybe some good can come out of this. Alden's dad was not on board. He didn't want to give her Alden's diaries. He didn't want this book to be published, but the mom really pushed for this. She felt like it was really important. Beatrice Sparks promised her that she could read the manuscript before publication. There were no contracts. There was nothing on paper. It was just, here is my son's diary. Do with it, you know, what you can do to help other kids. And I will put this together into something. I will give it to you to read before I publish it. That did not happen. Marcella was later in a mall, and she had a friend approach her and say something about the book. She didn't know anything about it. So they find out from other people that this has been published. Now, it's been published as Jay's journal. The names have all been changed. Some of them are very close to the real names, but the names have been changed. Like Alice, Jay's journal was a diary. It was 212 entries spanning 18 months. In it, Jay is a 15-year-old boy living in a small religious town called Apple Hill. So she's changed Pleasant Grove to Apple Hill. He's bright and well-liked, gets good grades, says his prayers, and has lots of friends. Things go south when his girlfriend, Debbie, gets him high. He moves on to pills, booze, and anything else he can find, along with two close friends, Dell and Brad, Jay spends his days wasted and worthless. Then, when he is busted for marijuana, he is slapped with house arrest and decides to abandon the witchcraft that he has learned at this school that he went to. So you can see already how she twisted what was really happening with him, had the truth, and then added a bunch of things that were added to it. She had...
Good Lord.
Okay, so, but she marks it as nonfiction, right? As a biography.
Yeah. Can you imagine being Marcella, the mom who loses her son to suicide, and now you got some moron taking his diary and now saying he was all about Satanism?
Yeah, I want to tell your son's story, and then the mom actually reads it and say, "This isn't my son's story."
That's horrible.
But it's really a launching pad for what kind of gave in to the Satanic Panic, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yikes.
Yeah. I mean, the book Unmasked Gallus, the one I held up.
Unmasked, yes.
The author, what's his name? Is it Rick? Yeah, Rick Emerson. He goes into detail of what Beatrice wrote in Jay's journal about, these weird rituals and very sexual. I'm like, what's up with this woman? She seems obsessed with the occult and sex. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, it just shows you how sick her mind is.
Yeah, very disturbing. Like, what the heck's wrong with this woman? Anyways,
okay, so let's expose her.
Yeah, with the imposter.
So the author, right? The author is being interviewed. Give us some background to this interview here that we're going to go into.
Yeah, the author Rick Emerson, who wrote Unmasked Gallus, had read Go Ask Alice from Beatrice Sparks, and he started having questions like, did this really happen? So he starts digging in, and the things he finds out is very disturbing. But that's an excellent book. I recommend that to our viewers. It's really good.
So let's bring that out, and here's the interview. We're gonna get into some timestamps here.
Now, I will let everyone know that Rick does not believe in God or Satan. Mm-hmm. So I disagree with him there. But that doesn't mean, this is when people sometimes act like, well, they don't know the Lord. They have absolutely no wisdom.
There's no truth in them at all. Right?
There's nothing good there. It's like, no, he did extensive research. I would listen to this guy. So anyways.
Okay. So this is the author here that kind of basically blows her theories and stories out of the water.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Still believed to be completely authentic. And Marcella said, well, I've got this diary, that my son, who took his own life, left behind. And I'm wondering if maybe you could help do the same thing for his diary that you did for Alice's diary. And, but that book then, that diary then appeared as Jay's journal. And, Alden's diary, even Alden's original diary in its intact form was something, again, depending on how you count the entries, it was something somewhere between 90 and, 105 entries.
Yeah.
Oh boy.
He just expounded on that.
Interesting.
All right, today we are joined by Rick Emerson, who wrote the book with quite the title, Unmasked Alice, LSD, Satanic Panic, and the imposter behind the world's most notorious diaries. How are you doing, Rick?
I am good. How are you?
I'm doing well, and I'm always interested in people who are putting out fraudulent information, scams, things of that sort. Also, I'm very interested, as of late especially, in the whole true story concept. And I don't know if you're familiar, in recent weeks, a show has come out called Baby Reindeer.
Yeah, I saw that.
And there's a huge amount of controversy with that show because it is a true story, not based on a true story, but a, quote, true story. And you were writing about a book, Go Ask Alice, that came out in 1971 that was a true diary, quote unquote. I'm curious, though, before we get into any of this, I remember Go Ask Alice as a kid. 1971, it has been around. It's held up now for over 50 years. What do we have, 53 years?
53, yeah.
When did you first actually read the book?
So I discovered Go Ask Alice, like a lot of people, when I was in high school, when I was a teenager. And I walked into my high school library, and there was you walked in the front door, and on the right there was a just returned shelf where it was like stuff that people had returned but that they hadn't refiled yet. And it was sitting up there, and I saw the cover of Go Ask Alice, which is, by that point was already iconic, and it was sort of this half shadowed face of this girl, and it said Go Ask Alice, and then below it was like those 5 words that I think have just been an eternal lure for that book. It just said, "A Real Diary by Anonymous." And I was like, oh, I got to see what that is. And I picked it up and I checked it out and I took it home. And I try to be a little bit suspicious of my own memories because, your brain is not like a video camera, despite what we like to believe. My memory is that I took it home and read it. And then I actually read it again because it's a fast read, and also it's gripping, and it was a fascinating story. And I read it a couple of times, and like everybody else, I was sort of like, it's an interesting story, but that was augmented, exponentially by the fact that it was presented as this true diary, and also by the fact that it was presented as a true diary, posthumously, that it was the diary of this deceased drug user. And, it's just unavoidable. That adds a lot of weight to it. That adds a lot of kind of gravitas, as they would say now. And anyway, and so it's, so I would have been maybe 14 or so when I read it.
Now, would you agree, because I make the same argument with Baby Reindeer, I'll make it with Jay's Journal, I'll make it with Go Ask Alice, that the impact of it is that it was a real story or a real diary. If it was just
absolutely
put out as fiction, people might say this is a really remarkable piece of literature or whatever, but nobody would care that much.
Yeah, they would certainly care less. Obviously, people's lives can be changed and affected by things that are fiction or that are novels. I think everybody's probably read a novel or seen a movie or something.
Yeah, that's my main question. Why didn't she just mark this off as nonfiction? It could have been as motivational, correct?
It's interesting, just because it is, I think it's the Library of Congress, that it is listed as fiction, and it's also listed as nonfiction. So how did that happen? I have no idea. I found that interesting. Yeah.
Did she want to make this? Did she want to fake like it was real for credibility as a researcher or journalist?
Yeah. And as a psychiatrist, she tries to say that she's a psychiatrist.
So she's seeking credibility. She wasn't trying to tell a good story that could, because I'm thinking, trying to play devil's advocate. She could have just wrote an inspirational story, and it could still be inspiring.
Well, plus even the title, Go Ask Alice, is reminiscent of the Jefferson Airplane song, White Rabbit, that came out in 1967. So we've got the whole drug scene going on, the early 70s still. And so I think that, attracted parents too. Oh, yeah, I know all about that song. That song's about heroin. And then they start thinking, oh, yeah, this has got to be real.
Which is also based off Alice in Wonderland, correct? The whole drug themed, I guess, and that old, was it 1950s Disney? 1950s? I think it was 50s,
was it 40s or 50s?
Yeah, 50s. Might have been 50s. 50s, 60s.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was just so taboo,
Yeah.
Okay, moving on.
Interesting.
Something that you went into it knowing it was fiction, and yet still it had this kind of visceral impact on you. But there is something different. I think there's 2 things. One, that it's a true story, presented as a true story anyway. And also that it was not just a true story, but it was a true diary, because, with a diary, leaving aside for a moment the issue of whether or not it's actually real. Just the whole idea of reading a diary is that you are presumably getting, when you're reading a diary, especially a posthumous diary, the sort of train of logic is that, I'm getting something that is not only real, but unvarnished, because it was not originally meant for public consumption. So therefore, I'm not just getting this true story. I'm getting this true story this person didn't anticipate becoming public. So therefore, they're not shaping it for public benefit. I'm getting, the unvarnished truth. And that adds this whole other layer of weight. And I mean, not to get too far ahead of ourselves, but I will say that you are definitely correct when you say that it had more impact because of this perceived authenticity. And you only have to look at, at A Million Little Pieces, the James Fry book, which by all accounts, he had unsuccessfully pitched as a novel for quite a while. and it was unable to get, he couldn't find a publisher, and I can't say this for sure, and I think there's probably some NDAs at work with that story, but the generally accepted backstory that has now come out is that at some point, either his agent or his publisher, possibly both, said, but if this was less a novel and more of, a memoir, then we're talking. And of course, that is what people gravitated to with that book, the idea that this astonishing story is also true. And it just...
Right. Yeah, he was on Oprah. I watched it.
Okay, that makes more sense because if you're trying to get published, you're trying to, I guess, be a successful author. Nobody wants this story. It ain't gonna sell. Kind of like reality TV in the modern sense. We don't want to. I mean, the fake shows are coming back, the series and stuff. You can watch Netflix, but like when reality TV came out, this is authentic. It's sold as authentic. The Real World, Jersey Shore. These are real life, but they're really scripted. Once you find out, kind of decades later, you're like, oh yeah, Pimp My Ride was not really. It's really not how it went. They ended up taking all the parts that they put in for the show out of the car, and then the guy didn't get the car fixed, so it really wasn't reality. But I can see the motive there, saying, "Hey, it's almost as it's a sense of urgency. I have to get this. I have to get this out. This is Beatrice. I'm trying to think like her. It's urgent. You need to know.
This is why I love books, and I love movies, especially a movie if it has a good narrator with telling the story. We love true stories, what people go through. I think this is why the Bible says that our personal testimony is powerful, because no one can deny that what God has done for you did not happen, right? And of course, yes, people can even lie about that, but for me, I am touched by stories. I love to hear what people have gone through and maybe how they overcame things. And so, there's a lot of merit to what he's saying, that if something is labeled as a true story, I think that grabs us,
Me, myself, I love history, and I scroll through all my apps and say, I don't want to watch any of that stuff. I want to get the documentaries. I like the documentaries. So
yeah, I like documentaries too.
But how would I feel if I see a documentary and then later down the road I find out that documentary was all fabricated and there's a lot of the credibility? You're like, really?
Right. The credibility.
So maybe money. Would you say money was partly the motive too? Notoriety.
Yeah. And she ended up marrying a rich husband because her dad left the family, right? So I think there's a lot of leftover things from her childhood that she didn't deal with.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So this is kind of, in my opinion, this is a way Beatrice can fill those holes in her own life. You know what I mean?
Yeah, her way of doing it, thinking she's overcoming these obstacles from the past. Yeah, I get it. It's like trying to be a psychiatrist, psychoanalyzing herself. I think, well, if I do this, then this is gonna.
But going back to her Mormon roots, what about false witness? I thought the Bible says we shouldn't bear false witness. So she can say all these evil things about Jay that weren't true, but it's okay. It's okay somehow.
And not to pick on our Mormon friends, but when the critiques are there, they're taught not to have discernment. They're really not. I mean, because when we talk about Joseph Smith, the whole history of the Mormon church.
Yeah.
Well, I've heard they're taught to kind of shun away from, well, they're going to be people in your life when you come around. They're going to say you're in a cult and you're in a false religion. That's more proof that you are in the true faith, Oh my God. And then people actually do it and they grow up and they told me about you, you're just, so this kind of a, cage mindness set that they want the church to have. And it's true. You can't say it's not with the LDS church.
Right.
I mean, we talked about it a couple days ago. There are now Mormon apologists. They're like, I guess, because they're trying to get the credibility out there. They're trying to debate Reformed people and Methodists and other Protestant groups, Catholics. It's like, see, we're up there too with the other Christian denominations. Well, no, you're not. You're not even Christian. That's in my honest opinion.
Right.
Can't be historically Christian.
And looking at the Protestant church, which you just brought up, I think sometimes we act like well, we have the truth and we never do anything wrong.
Right.
Really? Do we never do anything wrong?
Right.
You'll know them by their fruit, Jesus said, right? So,
okay, that's pretty
just because someone
interesting.
talks about God, Jesus, or the Bible does not necessarily mean they know the Lord.
Right. Or are walking with him.
Why is this so hard for some of us to get?
Yes, and I do. We're kind of going off, but I like when respectful pastors do step down and they're just saying, look, it's living in sin, admitting it.
Right. When do they do? Because I keep seeing those brothers back in the pulpit. When does this happen?
Some of them, majority of them go back in the pulpit, but there are some that do step down and say, you know what, time to move on. But that doesn't mean God gives up on them. Of course not.
Of course not.
As far as maybe in the position. So, I mean, yeah, it's a whole other subject. But anyway,
whole other show.
Another show. Okay.
Yeah.
So now we're going into another timestamp. He's going to elaborate further on, I guess, the context of the book.
When he began to really have serious questions. And this is why I love questions, Jess, don't you?
Yeah.
I love questions. God doesn't have a problem with questions, right? He was always drawing his disciples away alone to explain things to them, right?
Yeah, that's why I like crime and documentaries. We're trying to find out what's
going on.
Yeah, how did this happen? First 48 is one of my favorites. We would find out all the evidence is there. Now we backtrack what happened, and find the person. So now this is what he's doing. Let's do some what's called discerning, our Mormon friends.
There had still not been any sort of definitive answer about where this book came from, who actually, I mean, because if you look at the book itself, the only thing, apart from saying by anonymous, there's a note on the inside where there's a note from, quote, the editors, but they don't identify them by name. There's no indication who the editors were. And so that was really fascinating. And I remember, and I do remember this actually from high school. I remember talking about this whole idea of the anonymous diary. And I was like, well, who wrote it? And my friend Heather said, she's like, well, nobody knows, it's anonymous. And I said, yeah, but like who is it? And she said, well, and I think in her head, she was thinking, idiot. She's like, hey, idiot, like nobody knows. That's why it's anonymous. And, years later, I remember thinking, well, how can nobody know? Like, how can nobody know? I mean, as I think the character Lester Freeman said on The Wire at one point, he said, in this country, somebody's name is on a piece of paper somewhere.
Right.
And so then it just became sort of an interesting kind of, I want to call it a scavenger hunt, but it was really intriguing, the idea that, that somebody somewhere, there is a backstory to this. And so the backstory to me is almost always more interesting than the actual thing. That's the first part. The second part is that having lived through the drug war, and especially, as I said, the sort of just say no part of the drug war, that then was kind of, that was then joined a few years later by the Satanic Panic, this sort of 15-year witch hunt that spread, across the country, and everybody sort of knows about that now, and it was certainly in my town. And what I didn't realize until years later was that both of these things, the drug war and the Satanic Panic, were both, if not started by, they were certainly accelerated by or exacerbated by this pair of teenage diaries, Go Ask Alice, and then this kind of similar book called Jay's Journal. And when I then learned that both of those diaries came from the same place, that they both came from this, this big house with blood red walls that was on the outskirts of Provo. And that nobody had really looked any further into it. At that point, it was almost out of my control. At that point, it was like this sort of like this like throttle had been thrown, and I was just kind of all in. I mean, there was just at that point I just kind of couldn't stop.
When did you find that out? Were you already working on the book, and then you ran into the Jay's Journal side of it? Because that's the second book, folks, by the way.
I had not read Jay's Journal. Jay's Journal was, I think, a lot more of a regional phenomenon. It certainly did not have the mainstream impact that Go Ask Alice did. It had, I think, in some ways, a sort of, hidden or long tail impact, but that exceeded Go Ask Alice. But in terms of mainstream, in terms of just pure sales, for one thing, Jay's Journal didn't sell nearly as many copies. And it wasn't until I was, in my late 20s, maybe my 30s, that I started meeting people who had read Jay's Journal and knew a lot about it. And I started looking into it.
Wow.
And then I went home and realized that nobody else. I think the other thing is I assumed somebody else had written this book. It seemed impossible that I was the only one this interested. And so I was like, well, somebody has to have done this book already, which I think is how a lot of books begin, with somebody going like, well, this has to exist. And the more I looked, the more I realized it didn't exist. And it sounds a little glib, I guess, but it's also true that it was like, well, if I want to read this book, I guess I have to write it because it doesn't exist already.
Okay, question. Your angle going into the book, I'm curious. Was it, hey, there's this author who may well be a fraud, and she got away with essentially a giant con on the whole publishing world for decades? Or was it, there's this person and she was behind not one but two moral panics, maybe even three if we roll in the AIDS, and you found that offensive and wanted to pry back the moral panic? Was that
It was more the former.
Yeah, she actually wrote some other books I wanted to mention. One is It Happened to Nancy, which was about AIDS. Then Almost Lost, which was about gang violence. And Annie's Baby, teen pregnancy. And Kim, Empty Inside, about eating disorders. So I haven't read those, but I have to wonder, did all those books talk about how Satan was causing these things?
Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah, very interesting, right? And she also made a book called Voices, where apparently she interviewed like 1,000 runaway kids and got their true stories.
1,000 runaway kids.
Yeah.
Did she?
Really? Wow.
Oh my goodness. I do have a
that's disturbing.
The Brigham Young 1967 General Conference report, Deseret book advertisement for her book Key to Happiness. Did you hear about that one?
Who wrote that one?
That's Beatrice Sparks.
Oh, she wrote. No, I didn't hear that one.
Yeah, if we look at
Key to Happiness is to lie.
Put her right in the middle of the LDS Church, and this is not just
wow.
Carrot.
That's crazy.
So if you look at this, let me zoom in a little more because you can't really see, but blow that up like that.
Worthwhile reading.
So these are old books right here, worthwhile reading, and you look at it right here, A Key to Happiness. See it right here?
Oh.
$3.95. Written to high school and college girls, this book contains the secrets that make like a happy and rewarding experience. Forward by.
I wonder what the secrets were in her mind.
You can see Temple, Salt Lake City, Utah. So she was snapdack right in the middle of the LDS Church.
She sure was.
So,
yeah.
Very interesting.
Crazy.
Okay, moving on.
I think because until I really kind of got into this story, it had sort of been floating around for a while, that this is not as it is made to seem, that there's more here than meets the eye, and that there may have been, some distortion and some fraud. So I was certainly not the first person to sort of hear about that. But the idea of all of it kind of being linked, and that both of these things underscored, as you said, the sort of moral panics, I didn't really appreciate a lot of that until I got into the story. At the outset, I think for me, it was really just about trying to figure out, first of all, like, what is the process by which, Go Ask Alice, was created and sort of arrived in the marketplace, and what impact did it have? And also trying to sort fact from fiction about Jay's journal. And
so he's questioning it. He's saying, okay, let's look into this further.
Right.
What's really going on here?
Yeah.
So I'm just trying to keep up with your timestamps here. So
Yeah. So
another one here.
and then Beatrice lies about her credentials. Now, why would she do that?
No way.
She's a good Mormon lady.
Is her lying about her
Isn't that in
credentials?
their Mormon book? Thou shalt not lie. Or
21 minutes, 23 seconds where he gets into this about Beatrice's
Yeah.
credentials. Okay.
Yeah, I found
You
this
get-
part very
So you actually
interesting.
traveled to get a lot of your sources?
I did, especially because, I mean, so at this point, and I think a lot of this again changed during COVID, but when I went to Brigham Young University, and there's a lot of archives and whatever there, and I think a lot of colleges operated this way, where to look at a lot of their archives because they have everything. Pardon me. At that point, I think now you can do a lot of this online, but at that point, you had to fill out a form explaining who you were, what you wanted to see, what you were working on that necessitated the access to these documents because they have a lot of things that are valuable and irreplaceable. Then you had to have an interview with a special collections librarian, and the special collections librarian would interview you and then decide at that point whether or not you could have access to the archives. And the thing is, you had to do all of this in person. You couldn't do it over the phone. You couldn't fill out the application online.
Wow.
You had to do all of it in person. And so it was a question of getting a plane ticket and flying hundreds of miles and setting up an appointment, and all for the hope that this person would not then say nope, tough luck, go back home.
Right.
Anyway, but fortunately I was able to do a lot of that because it was pre-COVID. And I think some of that's been streamlined now, but ultimately there's just, I think there's an illusion now, or it's easy to think because of the internet and the internet is an invaluable resource, don't get me wrong, but it's also easy to think that there's a temptation sometimes to think that if you look for, I spent 4 hours on Google and I couldn't find it. And just, there's a lot of stuff out there that's not on Google because it's in a box in a basement somewhere,
That's a good point.
Yeah.
I think that's a good point, especially on any research you do. And when I try to do my research, even when you consider it a primary source because you think it's a primary source, sometimes it's not. So you try to get it dates, archives, but the internet's getting better as far as that. But we have such a low attention span. So when people say do your research, they are meaning Google, and they're saying go just type it on Google because Google is not a primary source. It points you to a primary source. It's not a primary source. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, another thing too, Jess, is people tend to think, well, if it's on the internet, it's got to be true.
Got to be true.
Like, really? Even when I work on my college papers, my professors constantly say, you have to use primary sources. You can't use X, Y, and Z, and they'll list some things. And yeah, it takes a little more work to do that, but you want to have credibility, right? In what you're saying. So, when you and I do our research, we want that same thing. We don't want to just pull something out and go, well, we think this is true.
Yeah.
Right?
It's our bias. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So, just there's a lot of people that aren't credible, and Beatrice Sparks was one of them.
Man.
And again, you got to get this book, Jess. I told you, it's like 370 pages. I read it like in a day and a half. I could not put it down.
Unmask or go ask.
Unmask Alice.
Unmask. So it's all exposed. He's airing out the dirty laundry, huh?
Yeah, well, he starts off actually in the 40s. I think it's the 40s, where the scientist was doing experiments with LSD. Then it takes you to the war on drugs, and it just takes this beautiful tapestry to show how all these different things are interwoven.
Yeah, it makes sense.
Yeah, it's really, really good.
I mean, because the things that she wrote weren't in a vacuum. Obviously, she's dealing with a hypersensitive culture. She knows that by writing this, that one, she won't be challenged, and two, this is really going to go over well with the hysteria and the panic going on. So this will put me on the map. I mean, look how the other guy mentioned him. He's like, oh yeah, this book is 53 years old, and it's been out for a long time. I mean, who doesn't want to have a legacy of a book,
Yeah, and when we get to the West Memphis 3, which started this whole thing with us, right? Just the panic with that just is absolutely ridiculous, right?
Oh, I know.
And how they just assumed these 3 teens were evil because they liked Metallica and they wore black clothes.
Oh, I know.
Right? It was like, and I even, well, you knew after we watched Paradise Lost, right, on HBO years ago.
Yeah,
I
look
said,
how it affected us when we first saw it. Oh man,
these
those
seem
teenagers!
filthy.
Wow,
I hated them.
I can't
How
believe these
dare
teenagers.
they?
Yeah, the narrative was there. They already had the story. Fill it in. We just need a face to put on it, and it was
Oh
just
my God! And they spent what, over 20 years in
18
prison?
years in prison.
18 years.
Innocent.
Wow. Over a false witness again, right?
Circumstantial evidence.
Messed up. So
yeah, nothing traced them to the actual crime scene. Wow.
Oh my goodness. Yeah.
Okay, so you gave me we have a rather 10 minutes or less on this next timestamp. Do you want to explain?
Did you show her credentials at the 35 mark? 35?
No, I think this is probably where we're going to go. We get the 25 to the 35. That's this one we're going into. You gave me 25 to 35?
Did I? I don't see that. What's it say, Jess? Sorry.
I got 25 to 35, 14. Then I have,
okay.
Is that the credentials?
Okay, gotcha. No, the credential, we could just skip to the credentials, which is 35 through 37, basically.
Okay, well, let's do that. 35, 37.
Yeah.
Let me just move here. 35 to 37.
Why would you lie about your credentials if you're trying to help people? Right? I'm saying.
Man, trust me. She's like the pre-trust me, bro, kind of.
Right.
Trust me, bro.
What?
What's really embarrassing is we go back to these old archives and these old false teachers or authors, whatever. You're just like, and they just look so pathetic. It's like, what were you thinking? They're smiling on their book. I mean, look at her. Look at her thumbnail. She's just happy-go-lucky Alice.
And she just kind of like a movie star. I noticed she liked to wear her fur coats and
was a fraud.
Yeah,
was a fraud. All right, credentials.
Context, it can be an unalloyed destructive evil. But Go Ask Alice, as you said, also paved the way for this sort of sibling book called Jay's Journal, which had a much more tangible, damaging fallout. Yeah.
So I definitely want to go into that, and that's why I wanted to get both sides of Go Ask Alice. Like, obviously, it's very fraudulent in a lot of the ways it's written, very questionable, all of that. But it's one of those that, if somebody came up to me and they said they feel like the book itself may be a net positive, I'd have a hard time arguing with that.
That is absolutely true. In fact, I actually printed this out. Let's see if I've actually got it here, or if I left it on my printer. I might have left it on my printer, but there's a thing that happens at the Library of Congress for years, this thing called the Letters About Literature program. And again, I think it's now the states all do it separately, but what it is it's for high schoolers, and you write a letter. I mean, people have done this sort of thing for years. It's where you write a letter to either an author or a character from a book, and it could be a fictitious character, it could be living or dead, and you just write a letter to them, an open letter to them, just saying, how they affected your life. So, so somebody could do it to, Jane Austen. Dear Jane Austen, your books have really been a source of pleasure to me. Or Dear Holden Caulfield, I read Catcher in the Rye, and after reading your character, I felt less alone, or whatever. And this happens every year. And just this year, so the 2023-2024 school year, the winner of the, I don't know if they still call it Letters About Literature, but the winner of this contest they do every year from Oklahoma was a young woman who wrote a letter to Beatrice Sparks about Go Ask Alice. And that is just this year. And she wrote this 2-page letter, which is really one of those letters that it's sort of crushing and kind of inspiring at the same time. And not to belabor the point, but she, in the letter, she just says, she talks about how she was born to a mother who was an addict, and that when she was 9 years old, when the young woman was 9 years old, her mom finally gave her up for adoption, which is a thing that normally does not happen to an, she went into the foster system and then was adopted, and her mom had to sign the paperwork letting this family adopt her. And she says, she's like, for years, I was so angry at my mother because I couldn't understand how a mother could possibly give her daughter away for adoption at 9 years old. How could you do that? And she's writing this in a letter to, to the, by now the late Beatrice Sparks. And she says, having read Go Ask Alice, I now have maybe something of an idea of what my mom might have been going through because she's still an addict. And so this gives me a little bit of a window into how trapped and helpless my mom might have felt and how hard but necessary it might have been for her to sign that paperwork to let me be raised by somebody else. And, and she said, because of Go Ask Alice, whatever anybody wants to say about Go Ask Alice, look, that book will outlive us all. I will be long gone, and people, teenagers especially, will be reading Go Ask Alice because it has this emotional truth to it, and there's value in emotional truth, I think.
Yeah. Good point, right?
Yeah, like I was saying, though, had she just, she would have had way more credibility saying, look, this isn't true. Some of these stories have been altered, but just wholeheartedly saying, yep, this is basically proven fact,
Right. And she had an opportunity to do something good with Jay's journal.
Yeah,
she could have kind of like warned against the dangers of drugs and not helping your child with depression get treated. But instead, she wanted the sensationalism and talk about how Jay was all into witchcraft, worshiping Satan and these sex rituals. And I'm just like, why?
Just imagine being a grieving mother, hearing all this stuff.
Oh my goodness!
Exploitation of your deceased son because he was depressed.
Yeah.
There's no lawsuits brought out against her from the mother?
No, the dad was like, we're not going to do that. I don't know if it's because she's a fellow Mormon. I don't know if it's like Scientology. We can't report anything bad from another member.
But she's doing good things for the church. Yeah.
But, yeah, very disturbing, right? And, in Rick's book, Unmask Alice, he does share the journal entries that Alden put in his diary. And I just felt for this kid. He seemed like such a cool kid. He just had questions and he was confused about things. I was like, if I knew this brother, I would have said something to him like, it's going to be okay, hon. Just hang in there. But she paints him pretty much as a monster.
Yeah.
And that's
Satan.
Yeah, that's disturbing.
So you have another timestamp, 48 to 51. Was that a context to that one, or is this basically the last one?
How about we do this? How about we end on,
because we want to go
38 to 48, and we'll stop it there. That's Jay. More about Jay, because I think we need to touch on him a little more, and then we'll just discuss the rest. So then we had a few scriptures. So
we say 38, 48.
Yeah. And we might not even have to go through that whole 10 minutes, but he just talks about Jay a little more. And I am glad he put some of Jay's entries in his book, because you get to see what was going on in Jay's mind,
Sad. Okay.
To sign that paperwork to let me be raised by somebody else. And, she said, because of Go Ask Alice, whatever anybody wants to say about Go Ask Alice, look, that book will outlive us all. I will be long gone, and people, teenagers especially, will be reading Go Ask Alice because it has this emotional truth to it, and there's value in emotional truth, I think.
Okay, so now let's go to where we can be critical, in my opinion. There's a diary or journal that was written by an Alden Barrett. Yeah. And I did want to ask you if Alden Barrett was perhaps influenced by Syd Barrett of Pink Floyd when he went through all his troubles. But Alden Barrett was a young man who did actually use acid, apparently. Did have a rough time. He felt trapped in a fairly conservative environment in Utah, kind of small town kid. Just got into trouble, like a lot of young males, quite often, especially. But he was sort of a troubled youth, was trying to get his life on track, was in a relationship with somebody, and tragically ultimately took his own life. And it's just I don't want to say it's a pedestrian story, because it's obviously a monumental story to him and his family, but it is not a story that hasn't been told before or something similar. Right. Would that be fair?
It's a common story. It's a story. It's a relatable story that I think versions of it, maybe with a less tragic outcome in many cases. I look, I mean, everybody, I mean, you could not pay me enough to be a teenager again. There is no amount of money. There's just no, in this era or any era, you could not pay me enough. People are like, high school, those are the best years of my life. It's like, well, good for you. That was not the case for me. In some ways, Alden Barrett.
Can you relate, Jess?
Anybody in the live chat can agree that you would love to go back to your teenage years. Put a 1. I sure wouldn't.
No.
Could I have the wisdom I have now? Sure, that's a whole totally different story. I wouldn't have any friends that would go to Princeton. But anyway.
Barrett's story is a stand-in for, what a lot of people go through when they're teenagers. And this sort of takes unexpected turns afterward. And it's, but I think in the same way that Go Ask Alice is, the character of Alice is relatable to people because it has this emotional honesty to it. I think, Alden Barrett's story resonates in some ways, certainly with me, for a lot of the same reasons. It was, he was, the thing that a lot of teenagers go through, where you're just like, nobody understands me. My parents don't understand me. I want to get out of this tiny little one-horse town and go someplace, where people are like me, with people who think the way I think.
To be fair on that, a lot of it is a compression. If you consider the fact that he was 16, 17, whatever. High school's 4 years. If you consider somebody's 18, that's almost a quarter of their life because you don't remember anything really before you were 3 years old or so. Now, if you take puberty into the question, you're talking about what, 12, 13, depending on the age, your lifespan now is compressed at that point to you've only existed for 4 years, 5 years. So everything is obviously much more heightened. A month counts for a lot. A year counts for a monumental amount. But his story alone, just as we described it, which is pretty similar to his actual diary, is a very fair, relatable, compelling piece of work. However, it appears it wasn't enough. And the book that came out from the diary was something called Jay's Journal. And can you describe how that basic story that we just told, I forgot what you said in the final book, it's like 21 entries versus some odd.
It's like 23 entries, something like that, because some of them are undated, so it depends on how you define an entry. But yeah, about 24 entries. Yeah.
Okay, so there were 24 entries approximately that were an actual diary.
Yeah.
And then somebody, because remember, she found it. Somebody embellished this and added either completely new entries or they took where an entry stopped and apparently continued the entry with a whole lot more information that on a wild ride.
So what happened with Alden Barrett, who, I think,
because maybe she thought the truth wasn't as exciting, so let me spice things up.
Yeah, the sensationalism that sells, right?
He wasn't sad. He was possessed because of the drugs and the occult.
Yeah, boy. So we can stop maybe in another minute and just.
I think all the evidence and everything I have ever read and everybody I've ever talked to about him, and everything indicates that he was a troubled but fundamentally good-hearted teenager who, certainly not perfect, certainly trying to better himself, but ended up taking his own life, as you said, and he left behind a diary, an actual diary. It was found after he died. His siblings found it, and his mother sort of looked at it and was like, well, and she read through it, and by this point, his to understand what was going on, with his sort of emotional and mental kind of turmoil, and they had done their best to try to help him, but mental health, especially for young people, was very much on training wheels at that point. And so, but they had this diary, and Go Ask Alice comes out, and Go Ask Alice, which again is presented as this edited but authentic diary of this deceased teenage girl, and so Alden Barrett's mother Marcella has this journal, and she eventually reaches out to Beatrice Sparks, who by that point, who a few years later had sort of outed herself as the quote editor of Go Ask Alice, which again at that point everybody still believed to be completely authentic. And Marcella said, well, I've got this diary that my son, who took his own life, left behind. And I'm wondering if maybe you could help do the same thing for his diary that you did for Alice's diary. And, but that book then, that diary then appeared as Jay's journal. And, Alden's diary, even Alden's original diary in its intact form was something, again, depending on how you count the entries, it was something somewhere between 90 and, 105 entries. Jay's journal comes out, and Jay's journal, I think, is 212 entries, and only 20 some which, 24 of which are taken from Alden's actual journal. And so the other 190 or whatever are just from nowhere. They just appear out of the blue, and they are vastly different than the rest of the writing. And
that's so sad. And what's sad is even though Beatrice used aliases for certain people in Eldon's life, in the town, and all this kind of stuff, people began to harass his parents. They began to vandalize his headstone. Uh-oh, what happened? Can you hear me? I don't hear you. Can't hear you.
Sorry, I was on mute. Of course, I was on mute. I don't want to be. Go ahead.
Anyways, they vandalized his headstones, and people would start having, little meetings at his, gravesite. It was just crazy, right? And just reading his journal entries, I was trying to find one, but he was in love with this girl, and when he broke up with, her parents forced him to break up. He was devastated. He felt like he found someone that got him, and they were close, and life together was good, and she even destroys that, saying they're having these, satanic orgies. And I'm just like, how does this help any church or the Mormon religion or anything? What went in Beatrice Sparks' mind where she thought, I think this is going to help some folks?
This is a good testimony of the Mormon church to the lost world. Yeah, for sure.
How sad is that, right?
Yeah. So we got some Bible to give them, do we?
Yeah, we do. Yeah.
Let's close with the Word of God. That's always the best way to end what we do, because it always rooted in the Word of God.
But it makes me sad, Jess, when we start viewing people a certain way. Then how do we treat them? You know what I mean? Look at the Salem witch trials. These men were convinced certain women were witches, so they didn't care about this woman's soul. They didn't care about anything. Just, we think she's evil, so she needs to be eliminated. Is that how Jesus would treat someone?
Right.
It's sad to me, Jess. I know this is kind of I don't know. I kind of feel like this video is a little dark, but these things need to be said. You can't just say all these lies about people, right, and start a panic, right? This influenced a lot of people.
It sure did. Yeah.
Anyways, yeah. So I think we have Matthew 5 first, right?
Matthew 5, I brought out. Hold on, wires are all. Matthew 5, 18 and 19, which states,
yeah,
truly I say unto you, until heaven and earth pass away, not one, the smallest letter or stroke of a letter shall pass from the law until all is accomplished. Therefore, whoever nullifies one of the least of these commandments and teaches others to do the same shall be called least in the kingdom of heaven. But whoever keeps and teaches them, he shall be called great in the kingdom of heaven.
That is not what I wanted.
Is that what you...
No, I gave you that, but I'm wrong. I wanted to get the out of the heart come false witness, but that's okay.
Okay.
I get into my research and I'm like, okay, let me write that down, and then I'm not paying
You did give me Ephesians 4:14. It says, as a result, we are no longer to be children, tossed here and there by waves and carried away by every wind of doctrine, by the trickery of people, by craftiness and deceitful scheming, or with regards to the scheming of deceit. Yes.
Trickery of people. I'd say Beatrice Sparks fits that definition, right?
Yeah, speaking truth in love, we are to grow up in all aspects into him who is the head, that is Christ, for whom the whole body being fitted and held together by what every joint. So with all her panicking in a cult. Could you imagine? There's not one mention of Jesus Christ in her book. Go ask Alice. Not a shocker, right?
I think the prophet's more important, right?
Yeah, being a prophet's more important.
I actually dated a Mormon guy. You met him, and I visited his home. I think he lived with his brother and his wife and someone else. But there on the wall was a big picture of the prophet, and I'm like, yikes!
Yikes!
So, that was interesting.
You also gave me Exodus 20:16. You shall not give false testimony against your neighbor, or answer as a false witness against your neighbor.
Did she do such a thing?
She so did.
Yeah. So.
You also gave me Proverbs 14.
Yeah.
Proverbs 14:14.
14:15.
14:15. The naive believes everything, but the sensible person considers his steps. Wait.
So we shouldn't believe just everything we're told.
Right.
Okay.
Wisdom.
1 John 2:26, and that's all the scriptures.
1 John 2:26. You gave me.
Mm-hmm.
These things I have written to you concerning those who are trying to deceive you.
Why would anyone want to deceive someone? Okay. So, anyways, I just found this interesting that before we had Michelle Remembers, we had Go Ask Alice. Right? And this all trickles down to the 90s. I think our next one's still in the 80s about the basking of rock and roll and Dungeons and Dragons. But eventually we are going to get to the West Memphis 3 and how the Satanic Panic, impacted the town when those 3 little boys were killed in Arkansas. Which is very disturbing. I think that's going to be a tough show. But
that's going to be a tough one, yes.
Yeah.
So as we close this thing out, let's just say it plainly. I think we've let the gentleman speak. Beatrice Sparks was not some brave guardian of troubled youth. Obviously, courageously handing the world the raw confessions of anonymous teenagers. That was the marketing. That was the costume. That was the little credibility cardigan she put on before walking into America's living room and saying, "Trust me, I'm here to help the children." And apparently America said, "Wonderful. Here are the keys to the trauma vault." But the deeper you look, the more the whole thing starts looking like less like ministry counseling or public service and more like moral panic fan fiction with a publishing contract. So Go Ask Alice was sold to the public as the real diary of a teenage girl spiraling into drugs, sex, madness, and death. It was presented as authentic. It scared parents. It shaped school discussions. It became part of the anti-drug cultural bloodstream. But over time, researchers, journalists have shown that the anonymous diary story does not hold up. Sparks is widely understood now as the real creative force behind the book, and the supposed real girl behind Alice has never been verifiably identified. The Library of Congress later categorized the book as fiction. Good. Cool. Which is basically the government's polite way of saying, ma'am, this is not a diary. This is a youth group haunted house with chapters. And it gets worse because Go Ask Alice wasn't some one-off confusion where maybe the publisher got carried away or maybe the editing was heavier than expected. No, Sparks kept doing this. She became, in effect, the patron saint of anonymous teen misery books. Every few years, another allegedly real diary would stumble out of the fog, conveniently anonymous, conveniently dramatic, conveniently stuffed with every parental fear of the decade: drugs, sex, Satanism, disease, pregnancy, runaways, the whole, the buffet of suburban panic. I tell the truth when you can slap real diary on the cover and let frightened parents do your advertising for free. Then we talk about Jay's journal, which may be even more disturbing. That book was marketed as the diary of a teenage boy who died by suicide after becoming involved in an occult. The boy's family later said Sparks used a small number of real diary entries from Alden Barrett. And he just said, 20? And then rebuilt a sensational satanic storyline around him. One they said did not reflect who he actually was. That is not merely creative editing. That is taking a grieving family's tragedy and dressing it up like a Halloween episode of daytime television. Where Beatrice Sparks' credibility doesn't just crack, it collapses like a lawn chair at a church picnic. She presented herself in ways that gave the public the impression of authority. Counselor, therapist, expert, doctor, whatever title the movement seemed to require. But reporting around Rick Emerson's Unmasked Alice, we just watched, highlighted serious problems with her claimed credentials, including academic claims that could not be verified.
Right.
Axios reported that Immersion found none of the universities Sparks claimed to attend had any record of her graduating, even though biographical material connected to BYU's collection still claims she had a PhD in human behavior. Because that matters. Because when someone says I'm a novelist, we judge the book as a novel. Oh, when people say this is real, I edited this from a true teenager's diary, and I have professional troubled youth, that person is asking for moral authority.
Right.
Parents, pastors, teachers, librarians, and teenagers to trust them. And Sparks that trust, put it in a blender, hit puree, and sold it back to America as educational literature. That was the scandal.
Yeah.
So
if you're dealing with the troubled teen as a parent, I think it's a lot easier to just blame it on Satan than to actually try to have conversations with your child, try to find out if there is a mental health issue. It takes time and effort to have a relationship. I think that stands true with God too. We give him an hour and a half on Sunday and we're good. What do we do in the other 6 days?
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
So she does not get to exploit dead teenagers, grieving parents, scared children, anxious communities just because your message is important. You do not get to fabricate credibility because the culture is afraid enough to believe you. And you definitely do not get to put on the lab coat of expertise when the receipts are missing. Beatrice Sparks wanted the authority of truth without the burden of proving it. And that, my friends, is not courage. That is fraud wearing reading glasses. So, and the saga continues of the Satanic Panic.
Yeah. So next week, what are we talking about, Jess?
We are going to go into
installment 3.
Dungeons and Dragons, and how that's evil. You're inviting Beelzebub in your living room with plastic pieces and a cardboard game cardboard puzzle
and rock music. Yeah,
Lord knows Satan's down there with Fenders and Ibanez guitars, loudspeakers that go to 11. Right? Obviously.
So I actually finished the book. Called Unmask. What was it? It's all about backmasking, right?
Yeah.
They play their song backwards and they're worshiping Satan. So I'm going to have a few clips of that. I read the book. This brother, God bless him, I think he thought he was trying to do something for Jesus. I think he wrote it in 1981, and he was a pastor. But he don't even know the names of these rock musicians correctly. He calls Don Henley Ron Henley. And then he says, for sure, this certain song is all about Satan. And a lot of these songs, I do know because I've listened to rock all my life. But so yeah, that should be an interesting show. And I'm sure we'll probably get some heat about that one.
Yeah, Paul is dead. Paul is dead. Remember you rewriting that? Paul is dead. But wait till we get to the West Memphis case and we see that occult expert. He had 12 black shirts in his trailer park home. Obviously, he's
that brother.
He got us. He didn't even. Yes, we're gonna get into his credentials. Talk about credentials.
And then how that thing just took off and ran. They didn't care. There was no evidence that they didn't care that one of the teenagers wasn't even there in town when it happened.
And was interviewed and interrogated for 17 hours. Oh my God.
And he was retarded. He had a very low IQ. So to me, that's police brutality.
What a bad case. I don't know. We might have to do a multiple part series on the West Memphis
It's very sad. Yeah.
But we do appreciate everybody who did turn up to check us out. We love when we get viewers. It's very important and dear to our heart, the subject matter we look into. It's important. This is a small little piece to a bigger story of mankind and their imagination, people who don't know the gospel, where they can just go to and fro.
And the devil made me do it. But
so next week we're gonna look out for the thumbnail there. We're gonna have Dungeons and Dragons and rock and roll. We'll have a dragon playing a guitar. That'd be cool.
Yeah, I like that.
Very cool.
I love the thumbnail for this one. You killed it with this one.
Why? Thank you. So don't forget to follow us on all platforms. Tune into my Substack. I'm starting to do Substack. I haven't done anything recently, but I'm doing
He sounds highly intelligent.
Yes. Shout out to In Context with Jim Green, as always, brother Remy Canadian, Reginald Wells. Mr. Cantrell122 on Kick. I didn't want to
Nice.
highlight your comment. It's very interesting, but it's kind of not what we're talking about. But anywho,
Well, tell me when we get off what his comment was.
any last announcements before we head out?
No, I just wish people would take the time to really study these kinds of things. So someone says this and you just believe it is gospel truth. No questions asked. This thing is evil. That person's evil. Okay, so that's the end of the story. Really? It's not a lot of discernment or critical thinking. It's just, well, this woman who's a psychiatrist wrote this book, so it's got to be true.
Got to be true. It's in a book. I found it in a book.
Yeah.
So anyway, God bless, grace and peace. We will catch y'all in the next one.
God bless.